Charles Ashworth Whitfield walked into his own manufacturing plant at 4 in the morning, the way he did 2 or 3 times a month, unannounced, wanting to see his operation the way it actually ran rather than the way it looked when everyone knew he was watching. He found a 19-year-old summer intern lying flat on his back underneath a $2 million precision milling machine. A machine 12 of Charles's own engineers had formally declared dead 3 days earlier, recommending a full replacement rather than continued repair attempts. The intern's name was Malik Reeves. He wasn't running any diagnostic software. He wasn't consulting a single manual. He had his ear pressed close to the machine's housing, one hand resting lightly against its frame, an old, battered wooden toolbox sitting open on the concrete floor beside him, and an expression of total, focused concentration that Charles hadn't seen from a single one of his 12 credentialed engineers throughout 3 entire days of failed attempts. "What exactly are you doing?" Charles asked, his voice carrying more genuine curiosity than authority. "Listening, sir," Malik said, not moving from beneath the machine. "Everybody's been trying to fix what they think is broken. Nobody's actually listened to what it's telling them yet." 20 minutes later, that $2 million machine that 12 engineers had called dead was running again. The part that fixed it cost $43. Before I tell you exactly how a 19-year-old intern accomplished what an entire engineering team couldn't, if this is your first time here, go ahead and hit subscribe, because this story is worth staying for all the way through. Like this video if you believe real expertise doesn't always come with a diploma attached to it. Share it with somebody who's ever been underestimated because of where they came from, and drop a comment below with the time and the city you're watching this from. I read every single one, and I love seeing exactly how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to understand exactly where Malik Reeves learned to listen to a machine before he ever learned to read a repair manual. Malik Reeves grew up in Detroit, Michigan, raised primarily by his grandparents, Otis and Vera Reeves, after his own parents struggled with instability that made a consistent childhood home considerably safer and more reliable in his grandparents' small house than anywhere else available to him. Otis Reeves spent over 4 decades working as a backyard mechanic, never formally trained beyond a brief apprenticeship in his own 20s, building a reputation throughout their Detroit neighborhood as the man who could diagnose an engine problem by ear faster than most certified shops could diagnose it with a full battery of modern equipment. Malik spent countless childhood afternoons in that backyard, handing his grandfather tools before Otis even had to ask for them, absorbing, gradually and without any formal instruction, an entire education in mechanical intuition that no classroom Malik would ever sit in could properly replicate. "Listen first," Otis told his grandson constantly, a phrase he'd eventually written directly onto a strip of masking tape stuck to the inside lid of his own worn wooden toolbox, the same toolbox that would, years later, sit open on a factory floor at 4 in the morning. Any fool can start pulling parts apart hoping to find the problem by accident. A real mechanic listens to what the machine is actually telling him first. Every single problem announces itself, if you're patient enough to actually hear it before you start guessing. Otis passed away when Malik was 16, leaving behind that toolbox, decades of hard-won mechanical wisdom, and a grandson who had absorbed considerably more genuine expertise than his own young age or lack of formal credentials would ever obviously suggest. Vera Reeves worked as a housekeeper at a mid-sized Detroit hotel for over 30 years, steady, exhausting work that she performed with a quiet dignity Malik grew up watching closely, understanding from an early age exactly how much discipline and sacrifice that unglamorous daily labor actually required. Vera took over Malik's primary care entirely following Otis's death, continuing her own demanding work schedule, while making absolutely certain her grandson stayed focused on finishing high school and pursuing whatever opportunities might eventually open a path toward genuine, stable career prospects. She'd never fully understood the specific mechanical language Otis and Malik shared throughout Malik's childhood, but she understood, with a clarity that mattered considerably more, exactly how much that inherited skill and patience represented her late husband's most significant gift to their grandson. "Your grandfather used to say a real skill can't be taken from you the way money can," Vera told Malik often, throughout his teenage years. He was right about that. "I've cleaned other people's hotel rooms for 30 years, baby, and nobody can ever take away what I know how to do well, even on my hardest days." You hold on to what he taught you the same way. That kind of knowledge is yours forever, regardless of what anybody with a fancier piece of paper might think they know better. Malik applied for a summer internship at Ashworth Manufacturing, Charles Whitfield's precision machining company, through a local workforce development program specifically designed to connect Detroit high school graduates with hands-on manufacturing experience, an opportunity Malik pursued with genuine enthusiasm despite the position's modest, unpaid structure. He impressed his immediate supervisors from his very first week, displaying a specific, unusual mechanical intuition that stood out considerably among a cohort of interns generally still learning the most basic fundamentals of industrial machinery. Though Malik's own lack of any formal engineering education meant his contributions were typically directed toward simple, entry-level tasks rather than anything requiring genuine technical judgment. He worked the plant's overnight maintenance shift throughout that summer, a schedule most other interns avoided, drawn specifically by the considerably higher hourly stipend the overnight position offered, understanding, with the same practical clarity Verna had modeled throughout his entire childhood, exactly how much that additional income mattered to their household. Malik had been working at Ashworth Manufacturing for just under 7 weeks when the plant's primary precision milling machine, a piece of equipment valued at just over $2 million and responsible for a considerable portion of the facility's most demanding contract work, suddenly catastrophically failed. The machine's failure occurred on a Monday morning, halting production on 3 separate contracts with tight delivery deadlines, triggering an immediate, urgent response from Ashworth Manufacturing's full engineering team. 12 credentialed engineers working in coordinated shifts around the clock to diagnose and repair the critical failure. Those 12 engineers, drawing on considerable combined experience and access to the machine's complete diagnostic software and manufacturer documentation, worked through the following 3 days without successfully identifying the specific cause of the failure, running an escalating series of increasingly complex diagnostic protocols that each, in turn, failed to isolate the actual problem. By Wednesday evening, the engineering team's formal recommendation, delivered directly to Charles Whitfield himself, concluded that the machine had suffered a catastrophic, likely irreparable failure in its core precision calibration system, recommending a full replacement at a cost exceeding the machine's own original $2 million price tag. Given how considerably manufacturing equipment costs had risen in the years since its original purchase. Charles, reviewing that formal recommendation with considerable frustration given the significant financial and operational impact of a full replacement, authorized the engineering team to continue limited diagnostic efforts through the end of the week, though privately he'd already begun the process of researching replacement options, trusting his own team's collective expertise even as the specific solution continued to elude them. Malik had overheard considerable discussion about the failed machine throughout his own overnight shifts that week, listening carefully to fragments of the engineering team's escalating frustration as each new diagnostic approach failed to produce results, a frustration that struck Malik gradually as strange given the specific nature of the problem being described. He approached the machine himself on Thursday evening, near the end of his own scheduled shift, initially simply out of genuine curiosity, rather than any real expectation that he might contribute meaningfully to a problem that had already defeated 12 credentialed professionals. He stayed considerably longer than his shift required, understanding, as he listened to the machine's own idle diagnostic hum, something that struck him as immediately, intuitively familiar. A specific, subtle irregularity in the machine's underlying mechanical rhythm that reminded him, powerfully, of a nearly identical irregularity he'd once helped his grandfather diagnose in a customer's failing truck engine years earlier. Everybody's running software that's looking for a complicated answer, Malik would later explain, describing his own reasoning that night. My grandfather always said the most complicated diagnostic tools can sometimes make you overthink a problem that's actually pretty simple, if you just slow down enough to physically listen to what's happening first. He retrieved his grandfather's old wooden toolbox from his own locker, the same toolbox Otis had left him 3 years earlier, and got to work. Malik spent nearly 2 hours working methodically around the machine, listening carefully to specific components with the same patient, deliberate attention his grandfather had modeled for him throughout his entire childhood, gradually narrowing his focus toward a specific section of the machine's cooling and calibration system that the engineering team's own sophisticated diagnostic software had apparently, repeatedly, ruled out as a viable failure point. He noticed, running his own hand carefully along a specific coolant line feeding into the machine's primary calibration sensor, a subtle vibration pattern that didn't match what he understood from his grandfather's teaching. A properly functioning line should feel like under normal operating pressure. He traced that specific vibration back to a small, easily overlooked coupling valve. A component considerably too minor and inexpensive to have registered as a serious potential failure point within the engineering team's own sophisticated diagnostic protocols that had been designed, understandably, to prioritize investigating the machine's more expensive, more sophisticated core systems first. Malik crawled underneath the machine's housing to get a direct, physical look at that specific coupling valve, and found it there, a small cracked seal, likely damaged during routine maintenance weeks earlier, slowly allowing a minute coolant leak that had, over time, thrown off the calibration sensor's readings just enough to trigger the machine's full safety shutdown, a failure so specific and so seemingly minor that it had apparently never registered as a serious possibility to an engineering team searching for a considerably more complex explanation. Malik was still lying beneath the machine, carefully confirming his own diagnosis before attempting any actual repair, when Charles Whitfield walked through the plant's main floor at 4 a.m, arriving for one of his own periodic, unannounced visits. Charles noticed Malik immediately, an intern he vaguely recognized from occasional interactions throughout the summer, lying beneath the very machine his own engineering team had formally declared beyond economical repair only the previous evening. "What exactly are you doing?" Charles asked, approaching with a mixture of curiosity and mild, immediate concern about safety protocols around a machine that had already caused his team considerable difficulty. "Listening, sir," Malik said, not immediately moving from his position beneath the machine's housing. "Everybody's been trying to fix what they think is broken. Nobody's actually listened to what it's telling them yet." Charles, genuinely intrigued despite his own considerable skepticism given his engineering team's exhaustive, unsuccessful efforts over the preceding 3 days, watched as Malik carefully explained, in plain unpretentious language, exactly what he believed he'd found: the cracked coupling seal, the resulting coolant leak, the specific calibration sensor malfunction that leak had apparently triggered. "You're telling me my entire engineering team missed a $43 seal," Charles said slowly, processing the specific, almost absurd simplicity of what Malik was describing after 3 days and countless hours of considerably more sophisticated diagnostic effort. "I'm telling you they were looking for something complicated, sir," Malik said. "Sometimes the actual problem is a lot simpler than the tools you're using to look for it." Charles authorized Malik to proceed with the repair immediately, understanding, with the sharp, decisive instinct that had built his own considerable business success, that verifying this specific, low-cost theory carried virtually no meaningful downside compared to the considerable cost and delay of a full machine replacement. Malik retrieved the replacement seal himself from the plant's own maintenance supply room, a component so inexpensive and considered so routine that it had never once factored into the engineering team's own escalating diagnostic considerations throughout their entire 3-day investigation. He completed the actual physical repair in under 20 minutes, working with the same careful, unhurried precision his grandfather had modeled for him throughout his entire childhood, Charles Whitfield standing quietly nearby, watching the entire process with a genuine, focused attention he rarely extended to routine maintenance work. The machine powered back on precisely 20 minutes after Malik had first identified the specific problem, its calibration systems registering fully normal readings for the first time in 3 entire days, a resolution that represented, in stark, undeniable terms, exactly what a 19-year-old unpaid summer intern had just accomplished using nothing more than his own grandfather's wooden toolbox and a lifetime of inherited, informal mechanical education. Charles stood in his own plant at nearly 5 a.m, staring at a fully operational $2 million machine, processing exactly what he'd just witnessed. Charles spent the following hour in direct conversation with Malik, genuinely curious about exactly how a summer intern with no formal engineering education had succeeded where his entire credentialed engineering team had failed across 3 full days of concentrated effort. Malik described his grandfather's decades of backyard mechanical work, the countless childhood afternoons spent absorbing Otis's patient, hands-on teaching, the specific listen-first philosophy written on a strip of masking tape that still lived inside the same wooden toolbox Malik had used that very night. My grandfather never had a single professional certification in his entire life, Malik told Charles. But he understood machines better than half the certified mechanics in our whole neighborhood. He always told me a real diagnosis starts with actually paying attention, not with running to the most complicated tool available first. Charles listened to this account with a specific, growing recognition of exactly how significant an oversight his own hiring and internship structures apparently represented, understanding, with considerable discomfort, exactly how close his own engineering team had come to authorizing an entirely unnecessary $2 million replacement, purely because none of them had thought to bring the same patient, fundamental diagnostic instinct Malik's own grandfather had spent decades teaching him. I need to understand something clearly, Malik, Charles said. You've been working here 7 weeks, unpaid, on our overnight maintenance shift, and none of my actual engineering staff had any idea you possessed this level of genuine diagnostic skill? Nobody really asked, sir, Malik said simply. I don't have the credentials that usually get someone that kind of conversation around here. Charles made a decision, standing in his own plant at nearly 6 in the morning, that would reshape the entire remainder of Malik's professional life, understanding clearly that what he'd just witnessed represented considerably more than a single, fortunate diagnostic success. I want to offer you a permanent position here, Malik, Charles said. Not simply as maintenance staff. I want to bring you into a structured engineering apprenticeship track, one that will pay for your formal technical education alongside real, paid hands-on experience within this company. I think what your grandfather taught you represents exactly the kind of fundamental diagnostic instinct that no engineering degree alone actually guarantees, and I don't want to lose access to that simply because our own hiring process was never built to properly recognize it. Malik, genuinely stunned by the scope of what Charles was describing, took a moment before responding. Sir, I don't have any of the prerequisites most engineering programs would typically require. I'm not asking you to meet prerequisites designed for people who didn't just save this company $2 million using a $43 part and a toolbox that belonged to your grandfather, Charles said. I'm asking you to let me invest properly in exactly the kind of talent this company apparently already has working its overnight maintenance shift, entirely unrecognized until tonight. Malik called his grandmother directly from the plant parking lot, still processing the entire surreal night himself, needing to share this news with the one person who had raised him alongside Otis and who understood, better than anyone else in his life, exactly how significant this moment actually represented. Grandma, I need to tell you something, Malik said, his own voice carrying an emotion he hadn't fully allowed himself to feel until that exact phone call. The machine everybody said couldn't be fixed. I fixed it tonight, using Grandpa's old toolbox. And the owner just offered me a real position here, a paid apprenticeship, funding for me to actually become a certified engineer. Verna was quiet for a long moment on the other end of the line, and when she finally spoke, Malik could hear, clearly, that she was crying. Your grandfather always said that toolbox held more than tools in it, baby. I think tonight proves he was right about that. I wouldn't have known what to listen for without everything he taught me, Malik said. I keep thinking about that, standing here right now. He'd be so proud of you, Malik, Verna said. I need you to know that clearly right now, in case I don't say it enough elsewhere. He would be so proud of exactly who you've become. Charles Whitfield, learning more about Malik's family circumstances over the following weeks as Malik formally transitioned into his new apprenticeship position, made an additional gesture that mattered enormously to both Malik and Verna. Though Charles himself described it simply as an obvious extension of properly valuing what Malik's family had clearly instilled in him, he arranged, through the company's own community relations budget, a modest but meaningful transition fund specifically to support Verna's retirement from her own decades of hotel housekeeping work, timed to coincide with Malik's new, considerably more substantial income beginning to stabilize their household finances. Verna retired from her hotel housekeeping position 3 months after that devastating, remarkable night, closing out over 30 years of steady, dignified labor with a small farewell gathering her longtime hotel colleagues organized in her honor. She purchased herself, with her own first month of retirement funds, a new dress for the occasion, the first entirely new piece of clothing she'd bought for herself in longer than she could immediately recall, a small specific detail that meant, to both Verna and Malik, considerably more than its modest cost might suggest to anyone else. 30 years cleaning other people's rooms, Verna said, at that small farewell gathering. I never once minded the work itself. But I'll admit, it feels like something else entirely. Finally having a little room of my own life to spend exactly how I choose. Malik began his formal apprenticeship at Ashworth Manufacturing in the months following that remarkable night, splitting his time between structured coursework toward a full engineering certification, and continued hands-on experience within the plant itself, working now directly alongside several of the same 12 engineers whose earlier diagnostic efforts he'd quietly, dramatically outperformed. Those engineers, to their considerable credit, responded to Malik's new position with genuine professional respect rather than any lingering resentment, several of them, over the following months, actively seeking Malik out specifically to learn more about the intuitive, physical diagnostic approach his grandfather had taught him, approaches that gradually began influencing how the broader engineering team incorporated hands-on assessment, alongside their own sophisticated software diagnostics. Malik excelled throughout his formal coursework, bringing to his academic engineering education the same patient, disciplined attention his grandfather had modeled for him throughout his entire childhood, a foundation that gave him, according to his own instructors, a considerably more intuitive grasp of practical mechanical systems than most of his formally trained classmates possessed. 2 years removed from that 4 a.m. encounter, Malik Reeves has completed the core requirements of his engineering apprenticeship, and now holds a formal position within Ashworth Manufacturing's engineering department, working alongside the same team that once, unknowingly, walked directly past the exact expertise that would eventually save their most valuable piece of equipment. He keeps his grandfather's original wooden toolbox in his own office, the strip of masking tape reading, "Listen First" still visible inside its lid, a detail he considers, he said publicly on more than one occasion, considerably more important to his own ongoing engineering practice than any single piece of equipment or software the company has since provided him. Charles Whitfield has, in the years since that remarkable night, restructured Ashworth Manufacturing's own internship and hiring practices specifically to better identify exactly the kind of overlooked, informally developed talent Malik represented, understanding, with considerable personal reflection, exactly how close his own company had come to losing access to that talent entirely, simply because their existing systems had never been built to properly recognize it. I think about my grandfather every single day I walk onto that plant floor, Malik said, in a conversation he later gave permission to share as part of this story. Everything I know that actually matters, I learned from him, in a backyard in Detroit, long before I ever set foot in a classroom. I hope, more than anything else this entire experience has given me, that it means somebody else out there paying close enough attention finally gets taken seriously too, regardless of what kind of paper they do or don't have in their hand when they walk through the door.
If you're watching this, I'd love to get to know you. Please comment your location and the time below. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next story. Thank you so much for being here today.